I heard that.
You did hear that, Craig. Yeah, good afternoon, team, and welcome into concrete carbonisation and coatings. Today we're joined by Resene Central Region Specifier Services Manager Craig L, who's tuning in from Wellington. Good afternoon, Craig.
Afternoon, Rob. Well, afternoon, everyone.
Now I'll roll through a quick bio on Craig before we start. Craig's been with Resene for over 17 years now and works daily with architects, including landscape architects and structural engineers, property owners and developers, and large building contractors on a wide range of projects. Heritage buildings are of special interest to Craig, having worked closely with numerous architects on around 100 or so buildings, predominantly in Wellington, and finding them very satisfying and challenging. Craig's also a NACE Level 1 coatings inspector, which focuses predominantly on protective coatings. Today's webinar is a good follow-on from last month's general chat on concrete and coatings, and we will definitely have time for question and answers at the end. So please do type any questions in that you have as we're traveling along, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. Now we'll turn our webcams off now, and there'll be a short 5 to 10-second delay before the presentation commences. So please do stay with us as the screen changes over.
Well, thank you, Rob. I'm, as Rob said, I'm the Central Region Specification Manager for Resene, and I've been in this role for some time. I suppose the reason I put this presentation together probably many years ago now was I was frequently being asked by architects and building owners, property managers, to look at old concrete structures, buildings that were showing signs of deterioration, mainly, I suppose, you know, spalling concrete that was falling off lintels, badly cracking and exploding around door frames, windows, and sometimes within the wall itself. So from that experience and from my own research, I've put together this presentation, which I'm hoping you will find useful in trying to understand what causes concrete to carbonate or reinforcing to spall and blow off concrete, and all the issues that arise from that phenomena. So I hope you enjoy the presentation and get something out of it. Right, well, let's get into it. So what I intend to cover this afternoon is what is carbonisation, how does it occur, the role of inherent properties of concrete shrinking, what consequence that has on the rate of carbonation, concrete spalling, ferric acid, which you may not have heard of, a coating's role in halting or slowing down the rate of carbonation, standard acrylic coatings, high build coatings, Elastomeric, 2-pack urethanes, and a couple of paints that you may not have heard of, or types of paints, silicon resin emulsion paints, and siloxanes, and the different versions of siloxanes, hybrid siloxanes. And then we'll finish with a conclusion. So here we go. So the carbonation of, or carbonisation, I should say, of concrete. This is a naturally occurring process within concrete worldwide, obviously, and the rate at which a concrete will carbonate depends on a number of factors. So how wet or how dry the mix was when it was poured, the cement ratio, how dense or hard it is, the concentration of chloride ions, and even how smooth or how rough the surface finish of the concrete is. In this country, F1 to F6. But as a rule, I suppose, most temperate climates like New Zealand, the rate of carbonisation is around 1 millimetre a year, and it can more than double in hot or humid climates, hence places like Saudi Arabia and tropical humid places. Concrete decays or carbonates much faster. So when the concrete concrete paste is new, it has a pH or alkalinity level of around 12, so quite alkaline. So this has a real benefit to reinforcing within concrete because it tends to passivate the steel within the concrete. So even if the presence of water is present and there's carbon dioxide present, the reinforcing is naturally passivated and won't corrode. Over time, however, as carbon dioxide enters the concrete, because concrete is very porous, lots of pores, if the conditions are right and the temperature and the surrounding air humidity does tend to mirror within concrete to some degree, then the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere can easily diffuse within the water present in the concrete, and the alkalinity of the paste is significantly reduced over time, and that paste or that concrete converts from a hydroxide to a carbonate paste. When the moisture content of the concrete is low or extremely high, then these parameters we've talked about, which is less than 45 or greater than 80, then the pores of the concrete are either too saturated with water or too dry. So not enough vapor pressure to allow for diffusion of carbon dioxide into the paste of the concrete. So why are cracks in concrete such a problem? Well, I think the illustrations that you'll see are probably fairly self-explanatory, but I'll just quickly run through that. So the carbonation of concrete is a good thing in a sense that concrete is very strong and compressive, but poor in tensile. So as concrete ages, it becomes, its compressive strength increases, but a side effect of this is that concrete, as we all know, shrinks. And as concrete shrinks, cracks start to appear, obviously, and that allows easier diffusion of carbon dioxide and water entering through those cracks, which speed up localized carbonation in those places, and often deeper within the concrete itself. So that 50 mil cover, which gives kind of 50 years, when cracks appear, that kind of changes things significantly. So this is obviously not desirable if you've got steel reinforcing within the concrete and you have no cathodic protection of that steel. As evident in this illustration, the presence of cracks can speed up the depth and severity, as we discussed. So the way to test if concrete is carbonated or not is a 2% or 0.2% solution of phenylethylamine mixed with isopropyl alcohol, and that will indicate whether the concrete or what the pH of the concrete will be. So the change of color of concrete to pink, that's a good thing. So it says that the concrete is quite alkaline and any steel within it would be safe from corrosion. Where the concrete color does not change, it means that we have, in those areas, the concrete has suffered carbonization, and if there is steel within that area, it will definitely corrode. Concrete spalling, as I spoke about in the intro, is a major issue in not just Wellington where I live, but throughout the country with older buildings. So generally 50mm cover is required in the code over any steel reinforcing. However, as I've mentioned, the cracks within the concrete will speed up, or any potential or future cracks in the concrete will speed up that rate of carbonization in a local area, causing the loss of alkalinity as the pH level drops below 12 and closer to 9. So when it gets down to 9, the ferric acid which surrounds steel, and this oxide film protects the steel from corrosion, then starts to itself disappear and corrode. And this creates the ideal environment for spalling of concrete, as the reinforcing is not passivated any longer. It starts to expand and starts to blow the concrete that surrounds that reinforcing. And we've all seen, if we've been in the industry for a period of time, that occurring in many older buildings. Right, the role of coatings. So coatings can halt or slow or sometimes halt that rate of carbonation or carbonization over time. If you keep the concrete relatively dry, that is as I've discussed earlier, a moisture content of less than 45%, then the carbonation process will be stalled or significantly reduced. So you can achieve this by various means through the use of coatings and treatments. So I'm just going to quickly run through what those coatings and treatments are. So the standard acrylic coatings, high build acrylic coatings like our X200, the use of elastomeric coatings, which kind of fall in and out of favor with specifiers and people as a go-to option. And we have a product called X300E. The application of 2-pack acrylic urethanes is another one. Silicon resin emulsion paints, which we will touch on, which you may not have heard of, and hybrid siloxanes. The first being standard acrylic paints or emulsion paints. Standard low build acrylic paints, which may or may not have cross-linking enamel properties, are generally impervious to liquid water, but will allow carbon dioxide to diffuse through the coating, and generally also moisture vapor. You can improve standard acrylic paints with the use, if you're going over concrete, with pigmented alkyd paints like our Shore Seal. As a primer, this will improve the properties of the acrylic paint above it because it's quite hard, dense, and it cross-links and will halt or minimize transmission rates more than just a standalone acrylic paint on its own. These are generally less expensive than specialist coatings because they have a much lower volume solids. In other words, all paints have a percentage of volume solids within them. So standard acrylic paints like Lumbercider, our Sonics, around late 30s, early 40s in terms of once all the water and solvents evaporate, you're left with just under half of the tin is actually solid material that is left on the wall once it's dry. High build coatings can have 60 to 70% volume solids, so hence you use a lot more of them. That's why they tend to be more expensive, because they go on at much higher film builds. Standard acrylic paints are available in various gloss levels from matte or flat to gloss, and they require very little skill to apply, so good DIY products. Right, high build acrylic coatings, as I've mentioned, alluded to a couple of them, like X200 and X400, which for those who've been around a bit longer may have heard of a product called Thixalon. So Thixalon is now called X400. They have much lower transmission rates. They're far less permeable than their low build cousins like Lumbercider, generally due to the amount of film build. As I mentioned, they have high volume solids and so are quite dense. And obviously the denser the film, the slower the rate of transmission. These kind of coatings are excellent at keeping out water in liquid form and minimizing the amount of carbon dioxide and water vapor diffusion. In other words, they have very low transmission rates. In doing the research for this presentation, I came across quite an interesting statement. So this isn't Resene, this is an industry statement. So as a rule of thumb, build high quality solvent or acrylic coatings, which achieve a dry film thickness of around 170 microns. So if you think of a human hair as about 80, most decorative paints like lumber cider, Sonics, once dry, have a dry film thickness of around 35, 40 microns per coat. With high builds, you can get 2 or 3 times that per coat. So the X200, for instance, you'll get 170 microns with a couple of applications. That's roughly equivalent to almost 3/4 of a meter of concrete. So it's like having a huge amount of concrete sitting in front of your reinforcing. So it can make a significant difference to the diffusion or to the transmission rate. However, if water does enter the concrete via these cracks, or inadequate or poor flashings, or just poor construction, then the water struggles to escape. And I'm sure you've all seen buildings with big blisters, basically with water tucked in behind, because these coatings are great at keeping water out, I should say, but they also keep water in if it does get in. These products generally require some specialist equipment, sleeves to apply, and tend to take a little bit more skill and effort to achieve a good and satisfactory outcome. Ultra high build and elastomeric paints. As the name suggests, ultra high builds like X400 or our old Fixlond and X300E, which is a true elastomeric paint. It's fair to say that all acrylic paints have some degree of flexibility, but elastomeric paints have the added advantage of having a memory. So in other words, most acrylic paints, whether they're 2-packs or single packs, they are flexible, so you can stretch them. But if you stretch them, they will not go back to its pre-tension shape. It'll stay deformed. Where elastomeric paints must, by definition, be able to return to its original shape like a rubber band. They, due to these extremely high film builds, which can be over 0.5 millimeter, 600 microns plus, they have virtually stopped all transmission of carbon dioxide and moisture vapor, and are therefore very effective in slowing or actually halting the rate of carbonation. Like a rubber band, however, not all, but a lot of elastomeric paints tend to be a little bit sticky in terms of attracting dirt, so that is a bit of a downside. They're not all that's not a property that they all have, but it tends to be a reasonably common property of elastomeric paints, that they can be a little bit sticky and hold dirt. But anyway, and if water gets trapped behind them, then you've got the same issue of unsightly blisters. While elastomeric paints do have applications, I personally don't think they're ideally suited to buildings. I believe they're more suited to civil structures. And if you do use or specify, or elastomeric paint is used for a building, then you've really got to stick with that option, and moving forward, keep using elastomeric paints on that structure. And they're very expensive because they take because the film builds are so high. You can only get 1 to 2 to 3 square meters per liter, so very expensive. 2-pack acrylic urethane, so which is basically, for Resene's point of view, would be uracryl. because it is an acrylic urethane, it acts like a standard acrylic. It's quite flexible. They achieve a slightly higher dry film thickness than standard acrylic single pack coatings. And because it's cross-linking, those coatings hold their molecules quite tightly together. So transmission rates are lower for the same thickness as other standard acrylic paints because they're so tightly bonded together. They have the added advantage of anti-graffiti coating. So the building that is shown was actually where my wife works. So they had some issues with tagging. So this was actually not applied for carbonation or for for that particular purpose. It was really designed or applied in this case as an anti-graffiti coating, which is very effective. This photograph was taken just after it was tagged, and the tagging was easily removed with Resene graffiti cleaner. So if you're after anti-graffiti coatings, then it doubles as both. Again, if water gets trapped behind the coating, it will also blister, obviously. Products like 2-pack acrylic urethanes are generally solvent in nature. However, Resene do have a waterborne that we developed a few years ago now called Acrylic 802, which is the waterborne version of that product, just as effective. These products generally require some experience and expertise to apply, and if you're using it in a confined space, you would definitely opt for the waterborne option. Silicon resin emulsion paints. So SREP paints are quite unique within the coatings market. Resene have our own SREP paint called Aquashield. So while this type of paint is indeed a coating, it is impervious to water. It is highly permeable to gases and vapor. So if you looked at Aquashield under a microscope, it would be like a mountain range. But it doesn't, when you touch it, it doesn't feel that way, but it's actually quite rough. So as a side benefit of Aquashield is that the effective surface area is only about 2 or 3%. So water that does hit the surface tension is so low, the water will just tend to run off the surface of the coating. That's unlike other paints. So it is self-cleaning, self-shedding paint. That's just an aside, another benefit of this product. It's very permeable. It allows water vapor to pass through it. So rather than water getting trapped in the substrate, if any water is in there, it can easily evaporate and pass through the coating. We haven't got to Acrylic Siloxanes yet, but if you do use this product, ideally you would use a product called Aquapel, which is our Acrylic Siloxane underneath, because of the high permeability of Aquashield, you also need a primer or an undercoat that also allows moisture vapor to pass through it. And Aquapel, which you'll see shortly, is the companion product with this particular top coat. The breathability reduces and virtually eliminates the chances of water getting trapped behind the coating, reducing the likelihood of spalling concrete because it keeps the concrete dry. That less than 40%, which we talked about earlier, stops basically the diffusion because of the pressure is so low. This kind of paint has a flat mineral effect, which some people really like. It can mark if it's frequently touched, but generally it's quite reasonably robust in most situations. Right, well that brings us to Acrylic Siloxanes. I think a lot of people have heard of siloxanes, but there are all types of siloxanes in the market, and as technology and the knowledge of siloxanes in chemistry has grown, there are many hybrids of siloxanes. We have a product which is Aquapel, which is an Acrylic siloxane, and it's quite different. It's not a coating, it's rather a treatment that repels water. It's an invisible treatment. So in broad terms, the defining feature of a siloxane are two pairs of silicon centers that are separated by an oxygen atom. An oligomeric siloxane is a hybrid of such a compound. So once the surface of the concrete has been saturated with Aquapel, any water hitting the surface simply can't penetrate and beads off, leaving the substrate looking dry. The application of these kind of treatments is critical, starting from the bottom of the wall and working up. So this product actually was used, I was involved in the ask by the client to come up with a solution for painting the Mount Vic tunnel, which is obviously very old and very leaky. They just really wanted to paint the roof or the crown of the tunnel and the sides where people will cycle or walk along. That was quite a challenging brief, but we in the end decided that Aquapel would be the best option here, simply because you can't hold the water back. It's just too wet, too much ground above the tunnel, and the tunnel was built with the way they used to build tunnels back in the day. They just didn't have the technology. So we used Aquapel first, and then Aqua Shield to impart color and allow moisture to breathe and pass through the coating without blowing the coating off the ceiling of the tunnel. So this treatment is very effective at keeping the concrete dry, just because it allows any moisture trapped within the concrete to escape past, like a two-way valve, I suppose you could say. There are some limitations with Aquapel, or with oligomeric siloxanes, it doesn't have the ability to fill or bridge any cracks. The product is ideally suited to brick and blockwork, or also tilt slab or precast concrete, as it helps to keep the surface dry and free from moss and mold. And if you have moss and mold, you have moisture, and if you paint it, the moss and mold will eat the acrylic coatings. It's invisible, and once it's dry, that is, and it comes in both a waterborne and a solvent-borne format. Right, normally I'd go to the next slide, which is a video of the application of Aquapel, our oligomeric siloxane, which is a really cool video. So, but for the sake of this presentation, which is being recorded, I'm just going to go to the last slide, and then after that, we will play live the video, which I hope you stick around and watch, because I think you'll find it extremely insightful and useful moving forward. Thank you. Conclusion. Right, there are many obviously benefits can be derived from painting a building. The most obvious, of course, is the aesthetics and the role that the paint can play in transforming both new and old tiled buildings alike. All exterior substrates materials used to clad buildings can benefit from various coatings and treatments available, whether steel, timber, or concrete. While new precast or in situ concrete is often left unpainted, this carbonation process will still occur over time, leaving the structure vulnerable to decay. This occurs as the reinforcing becomes susceptible to corrosion, as we've already discussed and seen, providing all the necessary conditions are in place. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. Every building is different in terms of its design, location, and method of construction, and the budget that you have as an architect to work within with your client. A solution can always be tailored to meet these requirements with some thought, some good working knowledge of the various options available, and a good understanding of the brief. I suppose really the only real risk is doing absolutely nothing. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this presentation.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Craig. That was very insightful. What we'll do now is just play that video that Craig mentioned there at the end of Resene Aquapel. They don't play particularly well when they're embedded in a PowerPoint presentation that we're showing through the webinar platform. So we'll just play that video by itself right now, and then we'll come back to a question and answer section once the video's complete.
Applying Aquapel waterborne water repellent to concrete blocks. Aquapel is a waterborne water repellent developed to improve the water resistance of cementitious surfaces, including concrete block, brickwork, plaster and fibre cement, concrete and terracotta. Waterborne Aquapel is not recommended for use under Resene Uracryl and Graffiti Shield. Where these are to be used, substitute solvent-based Aquapel, refer to data sheets. When applying Aquapel, it's important to apply sufficient material to effectively repel water. This will vary depending on the porosity of the substrate. The table shows typical spreading rates. The degree of water repelling is directly proportional to the amount of Aquapel applied to each square metre. We strongly recommend purchasing the exact volume required as per the table, thus ensuring it's applied at the specified volumes. Ensure the surface is clean and dry and surface contaminants including moss and mould are removed. Stir well using a flat-bladed stirrer. Aquapel is easily applied using a common garden sprayer. It can also be applied using a brush and for large areas an airless spray. Begin by thoroughly stirring the product using a flat-bladed stirrer. Using a clean can, ladle the Aquapel into the garden sprayer. We recommend the use of a funnel. We're demonstrating the application on 1 square metre of new concrete block. We expect to use 2.5 litres per square metre, as concrete blocks are very porous. Apply the product in a consistent, even manner, working from the bottom up, as in this case, or top down. Pay particular attention to the concrete block pointing. To ensure the surface is completely saturated, 3 wet-on-wet applications are undertaken. Note how the Aquapel is readily absorbed into the surface even on the 3rd pass. Aquapel will take approximately 2 hours to dry, and if used as part of a system, can be overcoated after 24 hours. To demonstrate Aquapel's water repellency, we're hosing the area and the blocks adjacent to it. Note how the water beads off the Aquapel surface while it's absorbed into the uncoated blocks. Aquapel will continue to repel water for upwards of 10 years, depending on exposure, and can be reapplied or overcoated. As the aquapelled area repels water and resists dampness, moss and mould are less likely to take hold, and the surface will remain clean and less blemished than uncoated areas. Aquapel is easily applied and effectively repels water from cementitious surfaces, including concrete blocks. However, it will not waterproof porous blockwork from wind-driven rain. Resene recommends the use of the Resene X200 waterproofing system for this purpose.
Okay, very good. Thanks for that, Craig. I'll get you to just bring yourself back up there. Excellent. We can see you and hear you. So we have had a few questions come in, so we'll roll through a few. Now, the first one came in actually relates to Aquapel. Aquapel itself from Russell Teo. Thanks, Russell. And can I use Aquapel to make a concrete block wall weather tight? So I think we probably need to be quite clear on that, Craig. I'll just get you to answer that.
Yeah, well, look, I think it was covered in the video that technically a weather for concrete block walls, the code requires a weather-tight membrane. So Aquapel doesn't fit the category of a weather-tight membrane. It is a water repellent. It doesn't bridge, or, as discussed, doesn't fill voids or holes. So that's, yeah, so it won't perform in that situation. But as we did see, it is still very effective.
Yeah, and just to point out as well, it doesn't meet the exterior wall weather tightness requirements.
Correct.
Within
That's right.
CC
Yep.
ANZ
code. Yep.
Yep. ANZ code of practice. Yeah.
That's
So
right.
a couple more actually on Aquapel while we're on that topic. Liz has asked Aquapel on sandstone, and I would think that that's perfectly fine on sandstone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you absolutely can use Aquapel on sandstone. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And actually, second question from Liz there as well, and fibrous cement, same again, there's no reason why you can't use it.
Yep. Yep, any cementitious surface you can flood with Aquapel.
Yep.
Yep.
And definitely the topic is Aquapel, because there's another question coming from Felicity Christian, suitable on rammed earth walls.
Oh, that's something I haven't been asked before.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I suppose it's suitable over, it's ideal over clay bricks. So rammed earth, I suppose, is a mixture of clay, but that's something we'd probably need to do some investigation on or research on. I'm not sure.
I think we have put systems out with Aquapel, the combination of Aquapel and AquaShield onto rammed earth and straw bale type dwellings to give it that breathability.
Yep.
So obviously we want to let moisture breathe through and out of any of those types of construction methods. So
yeah, and I think
sure rammed
earth homes, I think, generally are in fairly benign climates and have massive eaves to stop wind-driven rain, and they're normally in not particularly windy places. Then
Sure. Now moving on, so there's a couple of AquaShield questions here as well. One from Juanita Norman. Thank you very much. Would AquaShield product be suitable for use on heritage buildings that have sensitive brickwork?
Absolutely. I think, absolutely. So on brick structures, you would definitely use Aquapel, which is recommended over brick, and then there is nothing to stop you putting AquaShield over the top of that. It would be a lovely aesthetic.
Yeah, and I can just jump in as well and state I'm based in Auckland, and there's a number of heritage buildings in Auckland that have varying combinations of product systems, including Aquapel and AquaShield on them for that breathability. Really is site specific. There's a couple, one high profile one underway at the moment that's going to have AquaShield on it. As its finish coat, the site dictated a few other coatings like primer sealer coats before AquaShield, but quite often we're using Aquapel and AquaShield as a combination for that breathability.
Absolutely, yep.
Mark Clements has asked as well, thanks Mark, relative cost of the SREP or AquaShield type coatings, I guess, versus conventional coatings.
Well, you'd probably know the answer to that, Rob. I don't think there's very little difference, to be honest. I would have thought AquaShield is not that expensive.
I was just testing your knowledge out there, Craig. So I would think it's comparable kind of system costs, really. As I mentioned before, often it's quite site specific. So really what we're dealing with on site and what we're all trying to achieve with systems and the issues at site will dictate how the systems are specified, but generally as products they're fairly comparable.
Yeah, I think a 10 litre of AquaShield is very similar cost price or retail price to Lumbercider or Sonics. It's not huge, not a big difference.
Now a couple of other questions here as well. Again, staying on the AquaShield theme is from Ben Clark is can I use a breathable AquaShield over another paint?
You can use, but you just won't have the benefits of that. The paint beneath it, of course, the original paint won't, in likelihood, it'll just be a standard acrylic, I'm guessing. So, but you'll get the aesthetic of a lovely mineral flat effect, which AquaShield imparts, but you just won't have the added advantage of that breathability. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we need to point out as well, a product like AquaShield it's hydrophobic. So
That's
I
true.
think you might have covered that, or maybe just touched on it, but it's hydrophobic in itself. So it's another benefit or property of the coating is you'll find when you see it applied, water beads up and just runs off AquaShield. So, and I know for a fact on some of the projects that I've been involved with, we have put AquaShield over, say, X200 as a weather type membrane. And then AquaShield over the top for that hydrophobic nature, but also the look of it. It's a flat mineral effect, so really does suit those heritage type buildings. And
it has. Really nice, Rob. That's true. It has a lovely mineral plaster look to it. So, and as you said, because that effective surface area is so low, because of the profile which you can't see when you touch it, you're not aware of it. Extremely rough, even though it doesn't feel rough, and so water beads off it and takes whatever dirt is on there. So it's quite a cool product, an underrated product.
Now just another one on Aquapel as well. Janice Lee has sent through, can Aquapel be used in lieu of graffiti shield, graffiti shield coating, sorry, on brick?
No.
No. So
yep.
I'll just kind of add there as well, or jump in, as anti-graffiti coatings on brick substrates can actually be quite tricky and cause or create more problems than you expect with them, as if there's moisture, and quite often there is a lot of moisture wanting to exit brick buildings, getting in from various entry points, and it's for many years the moisture's been breathing out of the brick, and if you put a clear coating over the top as an anti-graffiti coating, that moisture gets trapped in behind the clear coatings and will discolor clear coatings pretty quickly. So we're always very cautious of putting anti-graffiti coatings over brick substrates because they can turn into a mess really quickly. So hopefully, if we're being asked those questions at sites, we're having these kind of chats and giving the right kind of information out around the real potential for creating a problem. And I guess where you were going with the Aquapel in lieu of graffiti shield, there are graffiti shield is a film forming clear coating, which is non-sacrificial coating is the term. So it's a clear coating that you wipe graffiti off. There are other anti-graffiti coatings out there that are sacrificial, kind of wax-like coatings that penetrate and essentially disappear on the surface. And when you take the graffiti off those products, you're taking the sacrificial anti-graffiti coating away at the same time, and you need to reinstate that. We choose not to have those in our range. We are believers that the non-sacrificial or film forming anti-graffiti coatings are better suited to our environment here. The other issue that you have with brick as well is the porosity of it. So the getting 100% of graffiti off brick will always be challenging. So
I think that's right. Just before we pass on the subject, I think it's the Uracryl, either the graffiti shield, the waterborne version, the clear, or the Uracryl 400 series. They're awesome anti-graffiti coatings, as I think I touched in the presentation. But in theory, an anti-graffiti coating, whatever you tag with Uracryl, can be removed. But in practice, the rougher the surface, the more difficult it is. So when you have mortar joints, and there's tagging in that, you've got to get a toothbrush out. It's just very difficult. Over tilt slab, it's a breeze. Smoothish concrete, easy. But anything that's heavily textured, or why there are machines I've seen in Europe to bristles that will just get in and remove it, rotating heads. It's not an easy thing, and so if you keep it just think of it, if the surface is reasonably smooth, then absolutely go for it. If it's quite textured like brick or has mortar joints, then it can be problematic and difficult in practice to remove it.
Yeah, and we do see a lot of it. It's not our place to direct, I guess, on specifying surfaces and textures, but often we get the request for anti-graffiti coatings, after a building's up, and everyone looks at it and thinks, oh, at street level, there's a real high chance of it being tagged, so we need to whack an anti-graffiti on there. Anti-graffiti coating on there, and the surface really doesn't suit having an anti-graffiti coating on it. So as getting back to it, I guess it's some thought at specifying stage, design and specifying stage around the environment and what's occurring, middle of the city, and an area that maybe not high foot traffic and at night and is frequented by undesirables, then there's smooth surfaces are best for removing graffiti.
Yeah.
Another couple of questions, flying through them, which is good. Some good ones coming in. Now, Joel's just back on the concrete spalling. Joel Robinson's asked, does Resene offer solutions for spalling concrete? I guess that's quite a wide question.
Yeah, through Resene Construction Systems, which is a subsidiary of Resene, they have a whole lot of plaster solutions, and we have a methodology in our specs that we write to deal with spalling concrete to an extent. So it's localized, and it can be managed. Then our specifications along with the Resene Construction Systems can offer solutions. Definitely, if the building is in really a bad way, then you'd probably bring in a specialist company that deal with, someone like a Concrete Solutions, if I can say that, or someone with that level of expertise. But if it's localized and reasonably, small in nature, then our Resene tech spec or our specs in conjunction with bringing in rock coat can deal with it reasonably adequately, and you can get a good outcome without spending a fortune. Yeah,
and again, as we've kind of mentioned, often it's with these kind of things, it's very site specific as to what's required.
It is, yeah.
And we often stress that from our side of it, we're the coatings guys, and quite often there's other works required to get to the issue or address it, and we can be part of the solution. Yeah, but often there's others required. Sarah Foyne's come in with asking, what does Resene offer to control efflorescence?
Well, we have a product called HydroBlock. So ideally, you want to deal with the cause of the efflorescence, the water, where the water is getting in. Once ideally you've dealt with the source of the ingress, or maybe let's say you can't, and it's just minimal, then if the wall is unpainted, then you can put a product called HydroBlock, which will hold back a significant amount of moisture and efflorescence and keep the wall looking dry, and then you can paint over HydroBlock, which is a clear. That can handle a significant amount of not water being forced through the wall, but if the wall is just looking damp and dark and efflorescence is coming through, that's a good option.
I think just again needing to stress that identifying the source of moisture that's causing the efflorescence.
Option, yeah.
There's no way of really, it's very difficult to eliminate it on an interior surface if the cause is exterior, which it almost always is, and stopping that moisture pushing through is really the best way to address those kind of issues. Sometimes it's not achievable when you've got retaining walls and things behind, or retained areas behind your block walls, should I say, and it's just not practical to dig those out. So yeah, it will be an ongoing challenge, and sometimes something that's not able to be resolved. So just one or two more questions. We're just starting to get to the end of time allocation here. What do you do when you can see some sort of old bitumen coating underneath peeling paint?
Yeah, so that's quite a common thing in the 60s and 70s before the advent of modern high build acrylics. Mulseal or different brands of bitumen paints were often used to weather tight concrete structures, and it's a real pain in the neck now because those coatings that have gone over the top have invariably started to fail because they were not designed really to stick to old bitumen coatings. And yeah, so we do have a product called membrane primer, which is designed to adhere to bitumen coatings. So ideally you have to remove all of the loose or weakly adhered coating that's over the top of that bitumen coating, put the Resene membrane primer on it, and then recoat it. But it can be an ongoing problem, really. It's not an easy fix. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, as you mentioned, the age of buildings as well. We see a lot of them. Yeah, certainly the older heritage buildings. That was essentially all they had back in the day to try and provide some form of weather tightness on the building. It also, I learned a fair bit being involved in the project I mentioned earlier, just here in central Auckland, that with the soot and the contamination of our environment back in the day, many years ago, there was no real way to clean the buildings when they were trying to coat them. So the bitumen type coatings were essentially waxed straight over the top of, or fairly close to being waxed straight over the top of the soot and grime that were on buildings. So yeah, that was all they had at the time, and we do strike them pretty regularly as some of these buildings required to be repainted. Really difficult to remove them from the surface. Really difficult. Really challenging. Yeah. A lot of elbow grease required. So now look, that really does. There's a few more questions that have come in there that we will get back to you directly on those questions. And we apologise that we can't get to them all today. So Craig will come back to you likely early next week and answer those questions for you. Yeah, thanks to all for joining us today. It's been an informative session. Thank you very much, Craig. Very much appreciated.
Pleasure. Thanks, Rob.
And thanks everyone. Thanks to everyone that's tuned in, and we will see you at our next webinar. Cheers.
Thanks, guys. Bye.